Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Purple Insider. Matthew Coller here, and returning to the show from fantasylife.com, Ian Hartitz. Ian, I am very excited to have you on as we are starting to enter fantasy draft season. How are you, my friend?
Great day to be great. Always enjoy catching up with you, at least once every off season, but haven't been let me think, with my Vikings and mostly in best ball mode over here. That's a form of fantasy where you just draft your team. You don't have to set your lineup. So, really is nice to be able to draft as much as possible. So drafting a lot less. And by that, I mean 0 Ty Chandler shares this year, Matthew. So I think we're already on the right pace with that. But no, man, it's great to be here.
Yeah, that's funny how these discussions change from year to year. We were certainly talking about that, and that was one of the odder developments from last year because Ty Chandler had gone for over 400 yards the previous season. He was a draft pick of theirs, runs a 4.3 40, and Aaron Jones is older. I mean, it all sort of added up to this is going to be a duo, but by the end of training camp, it felt like I don't think this is going to be a duo. I want to get into the Vikings quarterback schedule, but since we're already here and we've arrived on this topic, what do you think of the backfield this year, Ian? I mean, I think it's a lot more intriguing than it's been in our previous conversations.
I mean, Aaron Jones, I thought was fine last year, but you even hear kind of KOC talking about it. Like, to get the best out of him, I think Matt LaFleur knew in Green Bay as well. You kind of want that Robin to be his, to have a Robin versus Batman. Probably not the sort of running back to be handing 300 plus touches to. And accordingly, man, you did see some of his usual sky high efficiency numbers be a bit more average last year. So, I will say he's going to be 31 next December, but I do wonder if the age thing is just going to kind of slowly become a little bit less of an issue in future years with the way these athletes can keep care of themselves now. We're not seeing as many guys racking up those 300, 400 plus touch seasons time and time again. So between Henry, James Conner, Aaron Jones, there are a lot of these, aging running backs. But at the same time, if the injury gods do chill out, I don't know why he won't, again, post that kind of low end RB2 production that we did see last year. So the Jordan Mason insertion is interesting. I mean, last year, first 8 weeks, only Saquon and Derrick Henry have more rushing yards than Jordan Mason. So I think at a minimum, you would like to think Mason gets some of that goal line work. I feel so bad for Vikings fans. I've been forced to watch Aaron Jones and then Alexander Madison just run into brick wall after brick wall inside the 5-yard line. But man, I would guess Aaron again is going to be that pretty clear lead back. But do you think Mason could turn things into a bit more of a committee than what we saw last year?
I definitely do think that, especially from watching him play against the Vikings. Like, the guy is a broken tackle machine, and they struggled so much, as you alluded to, at the goal line, but also 3rd and 1, 4th and 1. They were just, let's pass the ball. Let's run a reverse or something at times because they struggled so much. And I think there's a lot of intrigue about the running game, not just because Jordan Mason is here and he's kind of Marshawn Lynch-ish in his violent running style, but also the revamping of the interior of the offensive line.
Yeah.
If you go back to last year, you had Dalton Reisner starting at right guard, probably the worst run blocking guard in the entire NFL, which is why he always struggles to get a job. And then undersized Garrett Bradbury, 6'7", former 6th round tackle Blake Brandel playing left guard. Like, that's not all that intimidating from a run perspective. And now you have a 1st round left guard, Ryan Kelly at center, and then Will Fries, who is a very strong run blocker at right guard. I think that is going to be a big determining factor of how this run game works out, because I think we know this, that it's not just running back talent. It's also what you have in front of you.
Oh, 100%. So again, this is now, I was actually surprised when I was finishing up my Vikings team preview over at fantasylife.com, but this is actually now the league's 4th most expensive group of, big uglies up there on the offensive line. So, and actually, when you look at some of these teams like Houston and Seattle, like really bad offensive lines last year, and they shuffled the pieces, but you kind of look at the pieces they brought in, and it's like, I'm not so sure these guys are much better. They're different. I appreciate the effort, but in Minnesota's case, it does seem like they actually did something. So I'll tell you what, man, I've made it through about 13, 14 of these team previews, and I swear I'm not just saying this because I'm on a Vikings pod right now, but only an 8.5 win total for the Vikings to me. And I'm, maybe a bit more of an optimist than I should be with this stuff, but that's been the best over I've seen so far.
Yeah, I think so too. And you're not alone in that. I've had some other people who are very skilled in the ways of picking those types of things on the show who have said that the Vikings over is something that they're going for. But I think that when we consider how those lines are made, they're made to try to get bets on both sides, right? And if you're going the under, the reason you're doing it is because the Vikings have an inexperienced quarterback. And sometimes in this world, we overestimate what a young quarterback is going to do. Maybe some folks in Chicago have done that like every single year. But with J.J. McCarthy, I actually used one of your charts for an article. I should have told you that I did this. But where you looked at all the PFF grades of the position groups over the years. Mm-hmm. And so I was inspired by that. And I looked at over the last 4 seasons, the rookie quarterbacks and first year quarterbacks in terms of their supporting casts and how they graded out by PFF. I mean, JJ McCarthy is truly taking over the best supporting cast. And then you add coach of the year. I think that if we believe in general that quarterbacks are a product of what's around them, not to the degree of running backs, but still that's a significant portion of their success, you can't set up JJ McCarthy any better than this.
100%, man. And yeah, that supporting cast rating is what you're referencing. I appreciate you giving the shout out. But basically what I've done is just take the average PFF team rushing, receiving, pass blocking, and run blocking grades. So everything except passing to try to get this idea. It's not perfect. We are weighting 50% of it with the blocking. And of course, mobile quarterbacks can influence, the rushing or sometimes even pass blocking grades involved. But yeah, man, last 3 years, Vikings 8th, 10th, and 11th. I mean, last 5 years, the top 5 teams overall, 49ers, Ravens, Eagles, Chiefs, and Packers. So I think sometimes with some of these, again, more advanced metrics that aren't perfect. Okay. Like it is really hard to try to sum up a supporting cast. You have the coaches, in play as well. Maybe guys are playing injured and stuff, but can we be directionally correct with it? And, looking at the bottom 3 teams, Jets, Jaguars, and Giants, I do think we're onto something, here, at least to an extent. So with McCarthy, honestly, man, he's someone who, again, after kind of diving into the numbers just a little bit more, am trying to be a bit higher on in fantasy land. I don't think we're going to see this, 500 or 600 yard rushing floor ceiling or anything, even though he can maybe run a sub 4.540, but you do look at it and just even coming out, man, some of the criticisms never made all that much sense to me. As much as I would love to hate this guy because of how much he has made me suffer in that Saturday after Thanksgiving here in Columbus, Ohio over the past few years, man, it's still like, hey, this is a 5-star recruit who originally wanted to go to Ohio State. He won a freaking natty at IMG Academy and then comes to Michigan and didn't throw the ball around a lot because they didn't need to with that defense and run game. So now you put him in again, a great supporting cast in an offense that has not only gotten the most out of Kirk Cousins and Sam Darnold, but we saw Joshua Dobbs and Nick Mullins provide, relatively high-end fantasy football value there. I do think McCarthy, again, relative to the Tua Tagovailoas, the Matthew Staffords, kind of those more stationary lower-end QB2s, I'm taking McCarthy over them every time.
Yeah, the running element is interesting because there was this stat that was going around at the combine that he had one of the quicker 3 cones. And then we saw even in the preseason game and in his training camp practices, he was willing to take off and run. And I've just felt like as the years have gone on here and the defensive lines are crazy violent and the blitzes are all over the place. We see that for Brian Flores, that it's really hard to win if you don't have a quarterback that can take advantage with his legs. And I think it goes even beyond just, he has to be able to scramble and get a first down from time to time. I think you actually have to be a difference maker with your legs, which I wonder if JJ McCarthy will do. And that's the whole thing that's so hard to project. And this is your job to try to project what these quarterbacks are going to do. But since we don't have a sample of him in college, like Michael Penix to say, well, he led college football in passing in back-to-back seasons, and we don't have a sample from last year outside of a single preseason game and the training camp that we saw, how do we project what JJ McCarthy is supposed to be?
Again, I think it's kind of going back into the offense, which, we don't have a ton of stability with McCarthy and what we're trying to do here, but everything else, man, I mean, we're talking about probably even an improved pass catching core. TJ Hawkinson, extra year removed from the knee injury. Obviously, Jettas and Addison doing their things. Fingers crossed, no suspension for Addison. I know that thing is still out in the air a little bit. People don't love talking about it, but even if so, it doesn't seem like it'd be more than a couple games, but maybe even get an improvement. Wide receiver 3, obviously use a little bit of draft capital there. Already talked about the offensive line upgrades. And again, for me, it's just like I try to trust, more so just pure NFL draft evaluators, Dane Brugler with The Athletic, obviously, in my opinion, one of the best out there. And when I hear people like Dane Brugler say that if McCarthy had declared in this draft, he would have gone first over Cam Ward. I mean, how do you think that would change our mindset here? Like just pretend last year didn't even happen. If McCarthy, for some reason, just sat out the season, whatever, won the lottery and said, I'm taking a year off. Like if the Vikings were getting the number one overall pick in 2025, being their quarterback, I feel like, the confidence level in McCarthy and then the team would be a heck of a lot higher, even though we again would be dealing with the same exact player that they got 10th overall or whatever the year before. So again, it's more so just trust in KOC, trust in the scheme, and trust in pass production from players that can't even hold a candle to what actually we've seen from McCarthy pedigree wise. So again, all that to say, I have the guy ranked, I think, QB 17 or QB 18. So it's not like we're completely going out of our way to get the guy, but I do think, he firmly deserves to be in that tier alongside guys like Dak Prescott. And yes, I would even take him ahead of the Michael Penixes of the world.
It's an interesting exercise because we have to draw from things that are not the usual areas that we draw from. We have to go back to, 2 years ago in college, but you can't really look at the whole college picture because as you mentioned, the way that they played offensively, and you're almost looking, don't stare directly at the McCarthy for this because they have so much around him. And the Nick Mullins comparison is another one that I use in terms of the Kirk Cousins decision for a reason to move on. It was like, if you can get this much out of Nick Mullins, they were within a bad tush push and a crazy bad interception from Nick Mullins of beating Cincinnati and beating the Detroit Lions and going to the playoffs with Nick Mullins as their quarterback because of Justin Jefferson. And he just seems quarterback proof. He seems like a kingmaker. And then you add everything else together. But the kid still has to play. So I think that this is just a never endingly fascinating discussion as we lead up to seeing what actually McCarthy becomes. But I did want to ask you about other quarterbacks on the Vikings schedule as well. The most interesting quarterbacks on the schedule, and that begins right with week 1 and Caleb Williams. I mean, what a matchup this is of discussions, right? In Chicago, they're just melting over Caleb Williams and saying he wanted to play for the Vikings and all that sort of stuff over the last couple of weeks. I think that they're terrified there that he might not be great. How do you feel about Caleb Williams going into year 2?
I can 100% tell you they're terrified. Rocking my Chicago shirt right now. So all my buddies in the group me, are just longtime Bears fans who I knew in college and everything. And yeah, they, third straight offseason championship. So shout out to the Bears for, getting that belt again. But man, it's just one of these things where I find it so hard to just blame 0% of what happened last year on Caleb Williams. I know that's what people want to do. I mean, you mentioned that article about him wanting to play for the Vikings, but the thing that killed me was the whole, Caleb Williams, he had to watch film on his own sometimes. And somehow that got twisted into Bears coaches never watched a second of film with Caleb Williams throughout the year. I mean, how is that? Like, you tell me Peyton Manning never watched film on his own, all right? Like, all of a sudden, that's the takeaway we're getting there. So it's just one of these things, man, where when you look at Caleb Williams last year, this Bears team was 4-2 going into their week 7 bye, all right? They looked fantastic. And yes, the competition dropped off, but Rams, Panthers, Jaguars games. Caleb was putting up some of the best numbers, honestly, at the position during that 3-week stretch. Afterwards, we get the Jayden Daniels, Washington Commanders, Hail Mary game, and then they literally lose 10 straight. So there were some highs. Honestly, those 2 games against the Vikings, particularly with everything Brian Flores was throwing at him, that was some of the best, I think, ball that Caleb put on film. But it's like, how are we supposed to look at Williams and say all those good things? That was Caleb Williams. That's showing the generational first pick. And then all the bad things he did, say, oh yeah, Shane Waldron, coaching. Forget about it. It's not going to be there anymore. So yes, the offensive line was bad. Yes, they've improved it a lot. But hey, PFF, shout out. They actually do a good job of even assigning blame on the sacks to the offensive line or to the quarterback. And even removing all the sacks the offensive line gave up, Caleb still did allow the most in the league. So I do think the Bears will be improved. But man, you look at this gauntlet of a division, they're also sitting there with an 8.5 win total. And I just have a hard time believing that this team is more complete overall than the Vikings, Packers, or even the Lions, obviously. So Caleb, I would expect a bounce back, but man, we got a long ways to go based on what we saw last year, if we're going to be talking about a top 10 quarterback. So improved Bears for me and Caleb. The fact that he can do the hard stuff, I think is half the battle, and that's great, but man, made the easy look so hard last year at times, and I'm sure Ben Johnson will do a better job with that, but again, I'm just not fully diving into the deep end like some of the Bears faithful.
Sometimes you just ignore the red flags because
Yeah.
you're so excited about the high end of a player. And this is probably Anthony Richardson in the fantasy world.
Yeah.
Like, yes, he can't complete a screen pass, but look at how big and coming out, I was an Anthony Richardson enjoyer because I thought like this guy could be the Josh Allen type of talent. And I guess it's still possible that he could take that step. But with someone like Caleb Williams, I thought much more so concerning about the film stuff than what he said about the Vikings. Although, if you go into a situation and you're like, man, I don't want to be there, I don't know how that affects you psychologically, because it
Right.
would seem to me that if you don't want to be somewhere, then already you're going to find every problem with it. But that whole film thing was wild. And also the defenses of it that I saw people write were also wild. Like, hey, well, Jared Goff didn't watch a lot of film in his first year 10 years ago. I mean, like, what are we talking about? There's so many resources that are available at this point, and every NFL player has to watch film on their own in order to succeed. There was a clip of Patrick Peterson talking about how much he would study opposing wide receivers, every way that they approach press coverage, every route combination that they ran throughout the year. If you want to be great, you have to be that person who is obsessed with it. And I think you can learn to be that guy, and Caleb Williams can learn to be that guy, but it's also the excuse. Like, well, I've got 16 different excuses of why this didn't go right. And yeah, I'm sure that Matt Nagy somewhere was like, oh yeah, I got blamed for Mitch Trubisky or John, or wait, well, yeah, no, I guess it would have been him, right? It would have been him
Yeah.
who got, or, just Matt Eberflus. Like, I got blamed for Justin Fields, and maybe they're blaming Matt Nagy for both. The point is just that I think that there is reason to look at Caleb Williams and go, I just don't know. I see some of the high end stuff, but can that be consistent enough over an entire season for him to be what he's supposed to be?
And I just think it's curious that I don't blame these head coaches for not responding to, the report and the book coming out and stuff like that. But you really telling me Eberflus, and I guess it'd be more so Shane Waldron, like this dude, obviously very excited about taking this Bears job. You tell me he didn't want to watch a little bit of film with Caleb Williams. Like, I just, hey, I've seen Caleb Williams' mansion in Chicago. It's pretty big. If Ben Johnson wants to move in there every single night, be grinding that film together, that is great. Sign me up. But again, just one of these things where we're giving a lot of benefit of the doubt and full certainty to one single quote from Caleb about that. And I'm just not buying it. So again, it's not like Caleb's the only guy we do this with. Look at CJ Stroud, had a fantastic 2023 rookie season. And part of that was because of Bobby Slowick, the new wonder kid OC. He was getting head coach interviews and stuff. And what happened in 2024? You ask a lot of Texans fans, and yeah, Bobby Slowick messed it up. It's like, oh, okay, so he was partly the reason why everything went so great in 2023, but just all his fault in 2024. Doesn't always add up to me.
Sometimes it's the players and not the plays. But as far as projecting Caleb Williams, how are you dealing with that problem?
It is one of these things where, similar to the Vikings at this point, we can check a lot of boxes around the quarterback. And accordingly, I do think it's going to be a situation where we do see a nice improvement in fantasy land. I was hoping that last year we weren't going to have this, Justin Fields sort of problem where we do have to just blame the supporting cast. But hey, end up seeing the offensive line fall apart. And again, like the Vikings, did see them go out of their way and not only, replace, I guess, bad performing players specifically in the interior of the offensive line, but do so with the best center on the market from the Falcons. They traded for Joe Thuney from the Chiefs, actually getting guys that we did see perform at a solid level. I know Jonah Jackson, not quite as much, but he does actually go back to Ben Johnson's days in Detroit. Every sort of metric we can see, play action, pre-snap motion, just, some of the more advanced EPA, numbers for specific play callers. Hey, or just watch the freaking games. All right. I get it. Ben Johnson, everyone believes in him. I think for good reason. He's earned that reputation. And again, you already have DJ Moore, Roma Dunze, and you add Luther Burden, and you add Colson Loveland. I mean, again, I know a lot of times last year we were saying this, this Bears offense, they got Keenan, DJ, Rome, like how he's got everything he needs. He really has everything he needs this time. All right. 100%. So if Caleb is still not able to make this work, man, it's going to be difficult. So I do think he deserves, because we do have, I guess, more of a proven rushing upside than someone like J.J. McCarthy. I mean, you look at it last year being, I think, 450 rushing yards. I mean, that is a top 10 mark in the league that we saw from Caleb. He's due for some positive regression in the rushing touchdown department. So I do think Ben Johnson and company are going to really fix that, again, problem I mentioned before, where the easy was so hard. There's going to be a lot more just, I guess, better design stuff, the screens and all that, the run game, hopefully, as well, should put a little bit less pressure on Caleb's back. So accordingly, I do think he deserves to be on that QB1 borderline. But I'll tell you what, man, we're not getting a discount. And it's kind of funny comparing Caleb and Trevor Lawrence, both alleged generational prospects. They both get these great new OCs coming in. They get some upgrades in their wide receiver room. Caleb's actually going higher in fantasy drafts right now. Like, he's a top 10 quarterback that you have to draft. Meanwhile, T-Law is actually going cheaper than the year before. So I know we've seen Trevor Lawrence be bad a bit longer than Caleb Williams, but Caleb is one of those guys where I'm sure in August we're going to have, some people, I don't want to call them casuals, but people who aren't exactly in the fantasy weeds, year round, they're going to be like, hey, it's Caleb Williams, guys. I mean, he's due for a bounce back. You should really be buying him. And it's like, yeah, I don't necessarily disagree, man, but it's going to cost you a pretty penny to do so.
Yeah, the second year, I think, is extremely telling for a quarterback. And overall, I would probably give any quarterback 3 years. But when you've put this much around him and you've hired someone with such an impressive record of succeeding offensively with the Detroit Lions. And remember, I mean, when Ben Johnson takes over, they had just tanked. And people were talking about, hey, the Lions should just draft quarterback because Jared Goff is cooked. He's not a good quarterback anymore when he's not with McVay. And Ben Johnson is at the center of turning that around. So if he can't succeed this year with this, then they've got some serious trouble, I think, in Chicago.
Now, like who are we going to point the finger at in that case, right? Because you kind of see this from the draft analysts who don't want to admit they're wrong right away. And guess what? A lot of things do happen and they can mess up, what you saw from these guys in college. But it usually comes down to like the O-line let them down. The play calling let them down. They had no one to throw to. And then like at that point, I guess you just got to say, oh, he was already so broke that, nothing they could add to the offense could actually fix it. So again, at this point, very few, fingers to point at except for that man, the mayor.
There is, it's like a wheel of denial when it comes to the quarterback. They love him coming out and then it doesn't go well. And it's maybe it'll turn around because it was this person's fault. And I think we've reached the level of the wheel where it better happen or you're just going to have to admit that it didn't work. Yeah. Going to Michael Penix, only threw about 100 passes last year. And I think 80% of them were big time throws by PFF. I mean, I know it was against Carolina, but that game was wild for the amount of throws and confidence that Michael Penix showed. I'm not terribly shocked because the guy had a cannon for an arm coming out. And I think that's one of the main reasons that Atlanta wanted him. But the fact that there's no quarterback competition, Kirk Cousins is a backup to Michael Penix. He is the guy in Atlanta. I think there's something to be said there because Atlanta might not be even able to move Kirk Cousins. So he's just going to sit and watch Penix. That's a good signal there. They have a really good supporting cast. They're also the Atlanta Falcons, though. So I'm not sure what to make. And you have to weave in Kyle Pitts takes into this as well, as the fantasy community consistently suffers with Kyle Pitts. But I feel like Michael Penix, just from a passing perspective, from fantasy, he's not going to give you a lot running, could be one of the higher producing quarterbacks in the NFL.
Yeah, this defense has been fairly consistently bad. I mean, God bless Jesse Bates, everything he tries to do out there. He's good for a couple, amazing plays per game. I know they finally, used some first round draft capital, probably a little bit too much based on that trade they pulled off with the Rams to try to beef up that defensive front. But assuming this defense is again going to be below average, I mean, I do think we're going to see a lot of games similar to that end of the year against the Commanders, against the Panthers, where constantly in comeback mode. And guess what? We love that in fantasy because, garbage points in the fourth quarter when the defense is playing prevent count the exact same as they do in the first quarter for us. So I've seen a lot of, negativity from, some of the better ball knowers in our industry, if you will, surrounding Penix. His completion percentage over expected was not good at all last year. He did have the big time throw rate, but obviously with that comes some taking chances. But I would just caution and say it was a very small sample size. It's pretty easy to say, oh, look at those interceptions. I mean, one of those picks hit Kyle Pitts directly in the chest, and he basically gave it to the defense. I think another one was a bad route. Another one was, kind of the point in the game where you need to take chances anyway. So, again, it was a 3-game sample, and just the fact that he showed he can make every single throw on the field. I mean, if we are going to believe in a stationary pocket quarterback, that's what you need, all right? Not everyone can have this, 4-4-40 where you force the defense to really respect you as a rusher. pressure and then also have the arm strength to get it downfield. So if you are in the year 2025, going to be pretty strictly, limited to the pocket, which Penix, despite having that 4.59 40 heard around the world at his pro day last year, he is more of a pocket quarterback. But again, that left arm, man, is an absolute howitzer. And you mentioned the Panthers game. I mean, some of those cover 2 hole shots. I know he hit my guy, Kadero Hodge, on one of them. And it was like, good God, like the audacity to even think you can make that throw, let alone to actually pull it off. So for me, I have him right there with Tua Tagovailoa, not because they're both lefties, but just because, again, I think we're looking at teams with bad defenses, with, a pretty good supporting cast, and with a quarterback that's going to be forced to basically throw as much as possible to keep them up. So not expecting too much from the Falcons in terms of, real life wins or losses. But if we did have to, have like a preseason all red zone team prediction, man, I think they're a good front runner.
Do you think Bijan Robinson was worth the draft pick for them as high as they took him?
He's a great player. So from that standpoint, yeah. But we see this time and time again, man. Late running back is unique. They can pull these random running backs out anywhere. Look at the Cowboys. Like, yeah, would it be cooler if they had re-signed Tony Pollard last year? Sure. But Rico Dowdle gets over 1,000 yards. I'm sure Javonte Williams or someone's going to be fine enough this year. So I know everyone can point back at Saquon Barkley. And yeah, he's incredible too for the Eagles. So I guess my nuanced point, my newfound nuanced point for running backs is, if you can make them kind of the cherry on top of your Sunday and you already have this complete offense, great offensive line, great infrastructure, that's fantastic, but you probably shouldn't be going out of your way to get them before. If Bijan Robinson didn't play the last 2 years and the Falcons just had Tyler Algier, do you really think they would have won any less games? I really don't.
Yeah, I think the same thing. And the Vikings have played against him twice, and he's had a handful of really good runs, but I have not felt like, oh my gosh, this guy is just unstoppable. Mm-hmm. I kind of felt that way when Saquon had one good Giants team and then beat the Vikings in the playoffs, and certainly watching him last year. And then Jahmyr Gibbs has been pretty unstoppable for the Vikings, but I just haven't had that same sort of awe when watching Bijan Robinson that you expect when he's drafted as high as he is. But as we talk about McCarthy and supporting cast, though, I think Penix is set up about as well as it gets from a receiving, from a rushing game, and their offensive line to succeed.
Offensive front really made a nice improvement. They lost their center to the Bears, mentioned that before in free agency, but still, I believe 4 or 5 stars returning from a group that PFF had among the league's best last year. So obviously Drake London, I think he's someone who could really, be actually putting forward that sort of top 5, top 6 season that we think his talents are worthy of. And shout out Darnell Mooney, man, because I know as a rookie, he did some good things with the Bears, but really didn't see enough of him, in his future years. And I wasn't expecting all that much with Atlanta, but the amount of times that this dude was able to just burn corners on those deep outs, man, like he really kept them honest all year. And I think before actually Penix took over, his numbers were as good, if not better, than Drake London. A lot more of the timing based routes, with Kirk Cousins, his lack of arm strength. So Mooney, underrated number 2. Now it would be better if they had, an actually, I guess, superior number 3 in an ideal world. Obviously that would be Kyle Pitts, but man, it's just some of the stuff we even go back to with Kyle Pitts. Like, how many times did we get to see that one-handed catch he made for like 4 yards as a rookie? Like, that was cool. Don't get me wrong. But the reasons why we continue to go back to this guy, I'm out. He's my tight end 16, tight end 17 at this point, because I just have not seen a great professional football player out there. All right. You can show me the wingspan stats. We can go over the 1,000 yards, 17 game season as a rookie. And hey, maybe he does finally get it together to an extent, because Ray McLeod is the only guy, that's going to be stealing those targets away from the number 3, but just bad vibes seemingly from some of the coach speak. I don't want to put too much stock in that. The coaches are just answering questions and May for crying out loud. But just with Pitts, man, it's how many times we need to be taught this lesson again. All right. Even the Penix games, like, yeah, that was cool. He had the game tying touchdown against Washington at the end, but man, just fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, can't get fooled again type of thing.
It's amazing how the fantasy world, if you just ask any analyst about Kyle Pitts, it's like, that's your podcast right there. Just say the name Kyle Pitts. And then there's like charts with yarn that are strung together on a chalkboard or something. It's very funny. And I think that the reality of the tight end position, and this is how I felt on draft night with Chicago taking Colston Loveland, was, they always seem great in theory, but that is such a hard position that I think takes many years to develop, that oftentimes It's the second contract that the guy ends up showing up and playing better. And we've even seen that from TJ Hawkinson. I think if you ask people in Detroit, what was Hawkinson in Detroit, they'd be like, had his moments. And then what was he like in Minnesota? He's been fantastic for them, Pro Bowler, and he's been a huge part of their offense. I feel like it's happened so many times. But Pitts is also another guy that always seems to be ailing in some way, like always has some little banged up and maybe not 100%, that you also wonder if he's ever going to just reach that ceiling. It kind of feels like he's not.
He's only 24 still, and you're right. I mean, I have run the numbers with age and experience. Tight ends do, in fact, take longer. We've gotten spoiled in recent years with Sam Laporta and Brock Bowers doing their thing in year one, but historically, especially relative to other positions like tight ends and quarterbacks, actually the two ones that take a bit longer. But he just doesn't seem to play fast out there. We know he's fast. We've seen the 40. We've seen the numbers and everything. But, man, there's been flashes. Like last year, he had a nice 4-game stretch, 65-plus yards every game, 2 touchdowns against the Buccaneers. One of them, it looked like he dropped short of the goal line. And it was like, man, I thought he was finally about to, be taking that next step. And then dude disappears, next handful of weeks. So, again, coaches even said that, made that point about just him kind of knowing where he needs to be, what he needs to do. And, hey, we shouldn't, just underestimate, finally gets to play in, the same system for a second year in a row. He doesn't have Arthur Smith putting Jonnu Smith out there every other snap, which, hey, as we turned out, maybe already knew something that we didn't have going on there. Jonnu Smith had a great year for the Dolphins last year as well. So, again, not completely writing off Kyle Pitts, but O.J. Howard was someone I drafted a lot over the years, and I do think sometimes, we look at these athletes, and I remember just back in high school football, some guys look like great football players from, March to August, and then there's the ones when you actually put the pads on and things change a little bit. I think we've seen that from Kyle Pitts.
So I want to get into 2 more really interesting quarterbacks on the Vikings schedule, but I also have to ask before we get there, who do you think is the starting quarterback for the Browns and for the Steelers? The Vikings play them overseas, those 2 teams. And this is not even a fantasy question because you just wouldn't come anywhere close to drafting quarterbacks from either of these teams. But just I need your take. Who are the Vikings going to face when they go play in Dublin against the Steelers and then in London against the Browns?
Steelers, I do think it's Aaron Rodgers. We've seen enough, smoke, and he comes out for his interviews and kind of drops a few hints. I don't know why he's waiting at this point. I heard someone float the rumor that he didn't want to sign before they release a schedule so they wouldn't have so many primetime games. But just, again, all the rumors surrounding Rodgers going there, and then just the Steelers. I mean, they can talk up Mason Rudolph, who, in Mason's defense, actually did put together his best, mini 4-game stretch the last time he was in Pittsburgh. But, Will Howard, appreciate the national championship, went in the 6th round for a reason. Like, again, Mike Tomlin, those guys aren't dumb. I do not think they'd be ignoring the position like they have this offseason. They didn't have some level of certainty that Rodgers was going to be there. And then for the Browns, I think Joe Flacco's the best one on the roster right now. He's almost like got that Jameis Winston in him at this point in his career where he's so willing to take chances downfield that, you're going to have plenty of mistakes, but good things happen. And I'll take that over the Kenny Pickett's of the world who basically are just scared to try anything. And accordingly, you have no upside. And guess what? You're not just going to get a mistake-free football either. So perhaps Shador can, just prove that the 5th round slide was all wrong. And, we were talking briefly before the show about some of the red flags in the interview process and all that. But man, if a team really thought that Shador Sanders could be a difference maker, he would have gone at least day 2. All right. Round 1, I get it. That's tough. You have a quarterback that's not this, height weight freak, doesn't have a big arm, doesn't have, a ton of speed. And just, again, went 5th round. It's the NFL. I do think the draft, I don't think it was a league-wide conspiracy. Let's teach this kid a lesson. No one drafted him until round 5. They took Dylan freaking Gabriel 2 rounds before the guys. So I'm pretty pessimistic on everything going with Cleveland. And yeah, man, just pull out that Browns QB shirt. They continue to update. We're at like 40 now. Shout out Tim Couch for getting it started way back in the day. So I think we'll have a couple extra names added to it this year. I'd be very surprised if any of them are overly good.
They're going to need an extra large shirt very, very soon. I've decided I'm going to be a Dylan Gabriel guy. That's going to be my thing. He does have a cannon for a little guy. So I don't know, maybe like could it be a Tua type of thing where if he could just see the field enough through some windows and trust his accuracy? I don't know, because I don't like any of them. So why don't I pick the guy that was the most fun to watch in college? All right, quarterbacks we actually care about. Sam Darnold with the Seattle Seahawks. Now, this one, if we had talked last year, we would have both been probably saying like, maybe Sam Darnold could be a thing. Everybody had the same take of like, I don't want to count it out after Nick Mullins had just thrown for 400 yards in a game against the Lions. And then he has a top 10 overall type of season. And I actually did win a little tiny bit with Sam Darnold as my fantasy quarterback because I did a draft right after J.J. McCarthy got hurt, and I just took him at the last pick or something, and he ended up being my guy. So what do we think of him with the Seattle Seahawks, though? It's a little bit of a drop-off, but they still have a lot of talent.
Is a really good example with what we were talking about where, okay, how many things can we continue to point blame at? For Darnold, I mean, Jets, Panthers, he was kind of a backup for the 49ers. We never really got to see him. I mean, there's plenty to blame, all right? Like the offensive lines were crap. We didn't have anyone to throw to. They fixed those problems. They give him KOC, gets a little bit of confidence behind him. And yeah, we saw what happened. A top 10 literal season for at least the first 17 weeks of the year. And even those other games, man, I saw Nate Tice do a good cut up of the, debacle against the Rams in the playoffs, took all those sacks, but man, ton of interior pressure coming up. And it's just one of those things where I know we did have a bigger sample before this year, Darnold not being a good quarterback. I'm not saying he's going to be top 10 next year, but last year we did have 17 weeks of him being much better than the last two. I'd like to think that we're going to get more of the former than the latter moving forward, but I do have some concern in just the Seattle fit in this offense. I mean, look, Clint Kubiak did some good things. Obviously got the last name that gets us all excited and everything, but just so much of last year is being kind of based around how good the Saints looked against the Cowboys and the Panthers in weeks 1 through 2. And I don't love when you're an offensive coordinator and yeah, injuries happen. They happen to every single team around the league. And like how unwatchable that offense became during certain parts of the year. Spencer Rattler getting absolutely no help. I mean, just really was a rough watch, but maybe they did just have enough injuries pretty much across the board that was the issue. But just kind of looking at the skill position guys, again, Seahawks offense, the offensive line in particular has been brutal for so long. They've oddly not even tried to invest all that much in it from both a salary cap and even draft capital perspective. So I'm not assuming the O-line is going to be great, which is going to hurt the run game. And then at wide receiver, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Cooper Kupp, I really do think have overlapping skill sets. Honestly, neither guy is a great separator at this point in their careers. And who's your clear out guy to try and make everything easier? Yeah, Marquez Valdes-Scantling. We're really doing this in the year 2025. So with Darnold, it's one of those things where, again, if he was running it back in Minnesota, I'd feel pretty optimistic that he could actually come close to replicating what he did in 2024. But, if we had to go through and guess what? Every team has a good, solid wide receiver, maybe even two. All right. So I don't want to completely make this the, crap on JSN and Cooper Kupp thing. But if we had to go around the league and again, just try to rate these supporting casts, I think you can make a pretty good argument the Seahawks should be closer to, 32 than actual one. So they finished 16th and 15th over these last 2 years. Maybe Kupp's reinvigorated. Maybe Kubiak has some more tricks up his sleeve and everything. But Darnold, man, right now he's honestly going so cheap in fantasy that I don't think it's, the worst late round dart. I mean, he's going QB 27-ish, and just relative to being next to guys like Stafford, like Aaron Rodgers, Darnold can actually scoot a little bit better than those guys. So if you are in these, multiple quarterback leagues, yeah, I think he's a fine enough late round dart to bet on. But man, the Seahawks are sitting there 2-7, 2-8. Things aren't going great. Darnold's starting to see those ghosts again, man. That chatter for Jalen Milroe is going to be pretty loud.
No, you're right about that. And I don't know what to make of what he's going to be, because you actually have to go back to 2021 for the last time he was bad at playing quarterback in the NFL. 2022, small sample, but he was good at the end of that season, or at least good enough. Yeah. And then in the times that he got in for San Francisco, he was good. And then he's got a full season of being good, which makes me think that he's closer to just being a good quarterback than he is the horrible quarterback that he was early in his career. I mean, but the Vikings just offered so much to him, the perfect situation, two of the best downfield wide receivers. And this is where my fit concern would be, is he likes to hold on to the ball. That's bad for one of the worst offensive lines in the league. And also he has two receivers that thrive underneath and intermediate, where he is a deep ball thrower. That's his cheat code. So how do you make that work? And as you mentioned, Valdes-Scantling is not that exciting. So the last one I want to ask you about, though, is Jayden Daniels. Is there any amount of hype that is too much for Jayden Daniels in the year 2025?
I don't think so, man. I mean, honestly, like you can make an argument in Dynasty Land, this dude should be the 101, like super flex leagues where you need multiple quarterbacks. And how can you say no? I mean, he's just fresh off. Only 4 quarterbacks average 20 plus fantasy points per game as a rookie. Cam Newton, Justin Herbert, RG3, and yes, Daniels. So honestly, the passing, I thought just progression we saw from Daniels was worlds ahead of what we saw from RG3 in that, 2012 Washington offense anyway. And just, again, 891 rushing yards. Daniels was the most productive scrambler in the NFL. And we knew that at LSU. But for me, like when I watched them play that final year, far more good than bad. But the one issue was almost like such a high percentage of his pressure dropbacks didn't even result in a pass. Like he'd go kind of, all right, Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas Jr., pressure, I'm running. There wasn't that much, creative, play, despite everything he can do. And honestly, similar to CJ Stroud. We just didn't see a ton of off-script playmaking. We did finally in the Georgia game, but it was like a one-size sample thing. We knew they had the tools, but they just hadn't really done it. Well, guess what? Jayden Daniels just did it pretty much over the course of an entire season. And he did it with an offense and a supporting cast that, again, I think all of us kind of figured was going to be bottom 5, bottom 10. Scary Terry McLaurin, awesome. We get that. But Noah freaking Brown, shout out Buckeyes, but he was the number 2 wide receiver on his team last year. Zach Ertz was a thing in the year, 2020. Offensive line has now added Laramie Tunzel, Cliff Kingsbury, kind of proven that maybe Coller was a little bit more of the problem. So he's got all the continuity. They've made meaningful, upgrades, getting Deebo Samuel in the fold and stuff. So I really do think that Jayden Daniels, again, it's Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, they've earned the benefit of the doubt, but we're already seeing Daniels going ahead of guys like Jalen Hurts, in just the 2025 quarterback ranks, because it does seem like he actually has that 4K passing yard upside, that 30 plus passing touchdown upside that I do think Jalen Hurts has the potential to get to, but they're just so good on the ground. They don't really even need to go all the way in there. So yeah, man, how high is the ceiling for Jayden Daniels? Might as well be the roof.
I wonder if he watched any film by himself. That's a really, really good question. If he was sitting at home watching any film, because I didn't know
VR, right?
Do that. Yeah, right. Exactly. Okay. Before I let you go, it's been great as always. Give me J.J. McCarthy's stat line for 2025.
Ooh. I'm going to say a tick under 4K. We'll go 3,900 passing yards, 31 touchdowns. We'll have Addison and Jettas maybe both get 10 plus, 300 rush yards, another 3 scores on the ground. I think he replicates Sam Darnold's, QB 10, QB 11 finish. How about that?
Wow. 31 touchdowns is bold, I think. I think maybe Jordan Mason's going to steal some of those away from him. That might be a little on the high side, but that would be an incredible season that would put the Vikings right there at the top of the NFC North, and I would not be shocked if that happens. Ian Hartitz, fantasylife.com. Make sure you go check out all of his work there. Great to get together with you. We will absolutely do it again soon, sir. Thank you.
Always, brother.